Welcome everyone to today's msexchange.org webinar. msexchange.org is a trusted resource for system administrators and IT professionals. Today's webinar is sponsored by Agile IT. Agile IT's commitment to doing IT right the first time for our clients is one of the many reasons why hundreds of companies have chosen Agile IT as their partner and continue to do so. A Tier 3 member of the prestigious Microsoft Cloud Champions Club, Agile IT sits among the top 0.5% of the online services channel and is recognized as a best-in-class Microsoft partner. We highly encourage all of you to use the questions panel to submit any questions or comments you have during the presentations. We'll collect those and have our presenters address as many of those as possible at the conclusion of the presentations. Our first presenter today is Steve Goodman. Steve has worked in the IT industry for over 17 years and works as head of unified communications for one of the UK's leading Microsoft partners, Content and Code, with a focus on Exchange, Office 365, and Skype for Business. Outside of the day job, Steve is involved with the Exchange community via his blog as an author, hosts an Exchange, Skype for Business, and Office 365 podcast, the UC Architects, and he speaks at user groups and conferences. Joining Steve today is Ion Gott and Konrad Agramant. Ion is a Microsoft Partner Technology Strategist with over 15 years of experience in the partner channel, running a national Microsoft Cloud Services practice for a Microsoft National Solutions provider. Konrad is the Director of Technology Services at Agile IT and worked at Microsoft for over 7 years in both product development and sales. And now, Steve, I'll turn it over to you to get us started.
Thanks, Roger. So today, we're going to first of all talk about Office 365 and give you a brief overview of what it can do if you've not used it before. And then I'm going to go into detail in some of the security considerations that you need to have when you're moving to Office 365. Then Agile IT and Microsoft will take over and talk about data encryption and the Office 365 platform, e-discovery and compliance across Office 365, and having a look at some of the security features that come in Office 365 and beyond. So if you haven't seen Office 365 before, I'm going to give you a very, very quick round-the-world tour of what it can do. Office 365's core workload that many people use, obviously all msexchange.org users should be familiar with, is email and messaging. Office 365 comes with the latest version of Exchange, version 2016, with all the bells and whistles configured, integrated into the other services, including Skype for Business and OneDrive for Business and SharePoint Online. You also get instant messaging, presence, meetings, and now cloud-based phone calls as well with the Skype for Business online functionality. It allows you to perhaps port your numbers to the cloud, or if you're just looking to be able to schedule meetings and webinars like this, then you can use the built-in IP-based meeting system, including the new broadcast meeting. If you're looking to drive engagement within your company, then Yammer is provided as an enterprise social network. And if you're looking for a place in the cloud to store your most important documents, then OneDrive for Business and SharePoint Online are provided not only to build complex intranets, but also to act as a secure repository to put your organization's data. On the client side, Office 2016 is provided, and it's delivered by something known as Click to Run, where it installs the full desktop suite on PCs, but it's delivered in a new mechanism that allows it to stay up to date with the cloud without those pesky patches that you might have had to do in the past. And not only is it available on a PC, but you'll also find mobile versions for iPads, iOS, Windows tablets, you name it, it's there. So if you've not set up Office 365 yourself, then I'm going to give you a quick overview on some of the core identity and mailbox migrations on offer. So when you set up Office 365 in a corporate environment, then typically you already have a local Active Directory. If you haven't and you're starting on a greenfield site though, then you don't necessarily need to set up all that infrastructure to start using it. So our first option is something called Cloud Identity, and that's where you've got a complete greenfield site, you're not looking to link to the local Active Directory, and you've simply got usernames and passwords in Microsoft's cloud server. The underlying directory called Azure Active Directory is compatible with the multiple services apart from Office 365, including Salesforce, logging into Azure services, and other services as well. and you can just create a simple username and password and start to use it. Perfect for a growing or small business. If you're looking to integrate your existing infrastructure, your existing Active Directory, as many organizations do, then you've got two core options, and they both center around having directory synchronization. Directory synchronization means that what we can do is get a copy of our local Active Directory accounts and put them into Azure Active Directory and make them available to services like Office 365. So if we create a new user on premises, then the directory sync components will synchronize that new account, and if we then subsequently update the display name or list of email addresses that it has, then it'll get pushed up to the cloud. And on certain attributes in the Azure Active Directory, so that data will be copied back down to our local AD. If we're looking to be able to log into the services, then we'll need access to passwords. And we've either got password hash synchronization, where an encrypted hash of the password is pushed in to Office 365, meaning there's no reliance on your local AD, or we can use something called federated identity, where all password requests are intercepted and then sent to your on-premises Active Directory via something called Active Directory Federation Services, a set of web servers that sit on the edge of your network and allow Office 365 clients to use their existing passwords directly against the AD. And that means that if they're not allowed to sign into the local AD, or it's perhaps offline, then they won't be able to access the infrastructure at all. And it will take into account not just the synchronized passwords, but all of the normal restrictions that AD has. For example, if the account is locked out, disabled, or it's outside of the logon hours that are allowed. It's as if they're logging to the local AD. Most customers who are implementing Active Directory synchronization to Office 365 will choose that middle option, directory and password synchronization. If you're looking to move mailboxes to the cloud, then we've got a number of options available. The simple migrations are more aimed at organizations on simpler or older email systems, where you're looking to get over to the cloud as quickly as possible, and you're not looking to implement any complicated infrastructure. The most basic of options available is something called IMAP migration, which uses a standards-compliant email protocol to synchronize a copy of a mailbox, or it could be on another system, perhaps Lotus Notes or a third-party open source system, into Office 365. But it only synchronizes email. The second two options are cutover and staged migrations, and they're both aimed at Exchange. They use Outlook Anywhere, or RPC over HTTPS, to connect to the local source infrastructure and create a copy of the mailbox into Office 365. The cutover Exchange migration is implemented before tools like directory synchronization, and allows us to get a list of the local email accounts, copy them into Office 365, and then do many incremental syncs of the whole organization before a cutover day where we switch everybody over. A staged Exchange migration is aimed where we want to do batches, and it'll do a single grab of an individual mailbox and pull that up into Office 365 and allow us to switch over. Both of these options are making a copy of the mailbox, so clients won't have the best experience when they move over, and that can often be complemented by third-party tools. A hybrid deployment allows us to get the best cutover experience or migration experience or stage. However we want to play it, we can do it with a hybrid deployment. However, it is more complicated. You have to implement the directory sync components first, and you need a server running Exchange 2010 and above. It allows us for smooth migrations, where the client will get a pop-up telling them that the server administrator has made a change, and that's it. They'll be on Office 365 OST intact. And they'll also be able to view free busy information and share calendars both ways. We'll also benefit from secure mail flow. So it's almost as if during the migration, Exchange Online is an extension of our existing organization. One of these options will be suitable for you. And these days, if you're looking to start a mailbox migration now, then you'll probably get some help from Microsoft's Fast Track Center, also known as the Onboarding Center. They will help advise you on the best approach to take and help push your project forward, perhaps helping you with some of the mailbox migrations as well. Once you've set up all these bits, all these prerequisites to make sure that you can actually move mailboxes to the cloud, then you also need to try and make sure that like-for-like configuration is in place. So if you've got active sync policies configured at the moment that require a PIN, then you'll need to recreate those on the other side to make sure that once a user's been moved to the cloud, then they retain some of these settings. You don't want to suddenly have no requirement for a PIN, for example, or to allow devices that don't support encryption to connect. And if you're not using hybrid, which implements some of these things like secure mail flow, then you need to set this stuff up manually. So if you're looking to ensure that mail sent between users that have been migrated to the cloud and users that are still on premises, then you'll need to ensure that you configure secure mail flow between your on-prem Exchange 2007 and below system and Office 365. And you need to take account of what you're going to need to configure before you start migrating mailboxes. Because obviously if there's a period of coexistence where these settings are not in place, then you run the risk of potentially allowing a security hole to exist in your organization during the migration. So set this up and test it properly before you start migrating, not after. So once you've moved into Office 365, what are the security considerations that you need to have? First question many people are going to ask is, do you need to protect your data in Office 365? I mean, it's in the cloud, right? They do that all for you. That's not an actual quote, but that's the view of many people. The cloud is something that one of the benefits is that somebody else is managing for you. Microsoft are looking after this big Office 365 environment. They have some of the most intelligent people managing it, and they have some of the best tools. They're writing the product to work in the way that they want to be able to monitor effectively and ensure it's secure. And that's right, your data is probably more secure than in your own data centers. If you've done a bit of research into Microsoft's data centers, you can't just walk in. They are very, very secure facilities, and they're set up that way, and they're not only secure, they're also very, very resilient. However, there's still stuff you need to consider because it's set up for you in a secure way, but if it's a person that already has access to the system, then you might need to think about ways that you can protect them against themselves or perhaps against leaking data to other people. Generally, people don't mean to leak security-related information outside the organization. Secure data is rarely maliciously shared. However, it does happen quite often accidentally. This might be through lack of adherence to internal policies that you've got, or just a simple mistake. Sending the wrong email to the wrong John Smith is a common example, or perhaps auto-completing the wrong name and then pressing send and worrying a little bit afterwards that something like that's happened. And in these kind of scenarios, sensitive information can accidentally be sent via unsecure email to external recipients. Without you necessarily knowing that it's happened. The first thing you'll find out is that there's been a big leak and you've got to try and clean up. One of the biggest areas where you need to think about this is modern attachments. So modern attachments is a new feature that came out with Office 2016 and above. What this does is it allows your users to, instead of sending an actual attachment, it can send an embedded link. From the user perspective, it's like adding a normal attachment though. They simply drop down, insert a new attachment, and they've got a link, an option to use a cloud-based attachment that adds an embedded link rather than the normal attachment. It'll reconfigure all the sharing settings appropriately to make sure it can share with the external recipients. However, if sensitive information is contained in there, then all the policies in the world on your email system aren't necessarily going to catch it, because they'll be sharing the document with the data from their OneDrive rather than over email itself. So you may be able to retract it if you find out that they've accidentally shared this information. However, the horse has already bolted and it's hard to get that back in or perhaps track where that document went to. With Office 365, data loss prevention capabilities are built in. These not only cover Exchange with built-in templates to prevent accidental loss of information, templates for credit card information, passport information, all sorts of personal information for many localities in the US, the UK, across Europe, across the whole world. And that also extends now to SharePoint and OneDrive for Business. So the same templates and the same policies can be configured to cover those areas as well with appropriate actions. So on email systems, it could warn the user before they send it to give them a little bit of a nudge. And if they do send it, then it can stop the message from going out or allow them in certain circumstances, if you want them to be able to do, to override. And you get similar functionality in OneDrive for Business, where you can immediately block the file, or perhaps if it's a small amount of data that you would consider to be okay to share over OneDrive for Business or put into SharePoint, then you can allow a small amount of data to be uploaded before it's all blocked off. These sets of policies are configured independently, but they use the same core templates, enabling you to have some quite extensive flexibility. One of the things about Office 365 though is it's easier to access data. You can now download a multitude of apps that make it easy to find, go through all your information from any device. Delve, for example, gives great access from any bring your own device to be able to search not only stuff that might be in your email account, but also across everything that's been shared with you in public sites in SharePoint, shared with everyone's sites in OneDrive for Business, and making it easy to access from any device makes it easy for people to copy the sensitive information away. And if you allow anywhere access and you want it to work properly, then how are you going to get around some of the more traditional key exchange processes for encryption? Azure RMS is the solution that you probably want to look at if you want to make sure that stuff can be encrypted either when it's sent via email, when it's saved via Office, or automatically in certain document libraries when it's downloaded from SharePoint. Azure RMS Premium is an add-on feature, and it gives extra capabilities, enabling you to revoke access to documents and track who's opened them. And it's not just about having the right credentials as well. Because if your users share their credentials, or perhaps it's been stolen through a phishing attack, then it's very easy for someone else to access your organization's data. And if you're using systems like the most common one, the directory sync with password sync, then you're not necessarily going to have that visibility into the Active Directory logons and movements that you normally have. Not in the same way anyway. You can't look through event logs or use traditional on-premises tools. You can lock down the access by location though if you want to, if you're running an on-premises ADFS server, or if you use Azure AD Premium, then again you can configure on the cloud side facilities to lock down the locations that people can access the services from. And generally you're looking at the external IP address of the organization. So if you've got certain internet breakout points and they've got a block of IPs behind them, then those are the ones who are used to lock down access to Office 365 services. If you do allow remote access, then reporting on logins, looking at spurious logins, may be far too late. You might want to be able to do something about it before it happens. So that's where you might want to look at multi-factor authentication. That enables people to log in with not only their password, that's something they know, but something they have. A registered token or device. Multi-factor authentication comes with Office 365, and it's definitely worth using. The MFA functionality is built in, easy to enable, and has all the apps that go across various devices. So if you've got iOS devices, Android devices, Windows Phone devices, you can use the Azure Authenticator app to register with your Office 365 tenant and allow the user to quickly approve or deny logon requests. They have to have the phone with them for it to work. If they're not using that specific mobile phone or one of those three, then they can still use text messages to receive the code to type in, or even receive a phone call and type in their PIN. So it's very, very easy to configure, and it makes sure that you're going to restrict logins to only the right people. You get additional functionality that when you add Azure AD Premium, that not only allows you to install some of the MFA systems on premises. For example, if you wanted to use the same MFA system to secure access to your existing VPN systems or on-premises SharePoint perhaps, but you've also got advanced functionality. For example, if you wanted to make sure that people who are in your offices don't have to go through the MFA process. So only for people that are outside or remote users will have to go through the MFA setup and activation. And finally, if you move to Office 365, then yes, you need to make your ActiveSync policies. but it only covers email, doesn't it? It doesn't cover all the other data that can end up on the device. It's a big, heavy tool that allows you to wipe the whole device and everything on it, but it doesn't give you any access to understand what data got onto the device or selectively wipe the device where needed. Remember, Office 365 is not just about email, it's about a range of different apps and services. The Office apps, the Delve apps, Skype for Business apps, they can all contain organizational data. To give you that control and visibility, you get some very basic functionality with Office 365 MDM. For example, making sure that the device isn't jailbroken and selective wipe of the device as well. But the add-on service Intune is a full MDM solution, almost like a big step up from Office 365 MDM, and it provides mobile device management to manage what's on the device itself and all the functionality that the device can possess. But it also gives you mobile application management as well to manage what's in those apps, the functionality exposed, or how the Word apps, for example, are used, where the buttons for sharing allow people to share data with. It allows you to not only manage the device, but also manage the Office apps that are installed on it. So you can keep data secure for a long period of time in Office 365. Disaster recovery isn't something you need to worry about. It's something built into the service. You're already buying a service that it's replicating your data across multiple data centers. But it's still possible for you to make a mistake and delete important data, or more likely a user to make a mistake, or perhaps maliciously delete data. And if something's deleted permanently from Office 365 by you, then it's gone forever. There's no opportunity to phone up and perhaps get it back from a backup, especially if it's been deleted from email. It's gone. What you can do is extend the retention periods. So by default, you'll have 15 days for a user to recover a deleted item, for example, from their mailbox, and you can increase that to 30 days. But most organizations will look at in-place hold. That allows you to retain data across the service for as long as you need. For example, if you need to keep data for 6 years or 10 years, then you can create hold policies that make sure that if something's deleted by the user, then it's stored somewhere safe that legal teams, system administrators can discover and retrieve the data. It also means that if a user leaves the organization and they've been placed on hold, then their data is kept and, most importantly, it doesn't consume a license. So in summary, you can protect your data very easily, but you need to understand the right tools that you're going to use for the job, and the tools come with the suite. So everything you need to protect your data is available in Office 365 and with the add-on EMS suite. You can do the basics using what's included in the Office 365 E3 plan. It allows you to add in place hold, use the MDM, basic functionality, and so on. But the new E5 suite, which provides better protection for things like email and EMS, provide the most comprehensive protection with the Microsoft solutions. So before we move on, let's see if we've got any questions from the audience.
Well, thank you, Steve. We do have a couple questions that I'm going to go ahead and dive into right now. The first question is, I've already got a multi-factor solution for my existing environment. Can I use it with Office 365?
Often it does depend on what the solution is. It may need to be upgraded or it may not work at all, but in many cases the answer is yes. However, you might need to do things a certain way. If your MFA solution is compatible with Active Directory Federation services, which was the third option that we saw earlier when we were looking at identity, where you have an on-premises server which is responsible for saying yay or nay to log into Office 365, then you can use MFA with that solution. That means that when the user logs in, they'll get redirected to the ADFS server, type in the username and password, and at that point, the MFA solution that you're using, whichever it is, should then prompt them to confirm via the token or whatever you're using to log in. Now, that in the past has been quite difficult to use with Office 365 because things like the rich clients like Outlook. However, there are some new changes with something called modern authentication, where the new clients, Office 2013 and 2016, allow the web page to show up when you log into things like Outlook for mail. So it'll give you the full browser logon page in a small compressed window, and it'll allow you to log in, put in your MFA details, and then it'll keep that token for a set period of time before needing to refresh. Or if you're behind the firewall and on the LAN, then let you go straight through with Windows Integrated Authentication. In the past, MFA solutions like that could be quite troublesome with the rich clients because there was no way for Outlook, for example, to send its password and go past the challenge and response prompt through an MFA solution. So the answer is yes, but you'll probably need to make sure it's compatible, and most likely you'll need to use modern authentication.
Well, very good. We'll have to wrap up the questions at this point and move on, but I want to thank you, Steve, for joining us from the UK and your great insights as usual. And we'll now turn things over to our next presenter, Conrad Agramont. Conrad?
Thank you. So today we're going to talk about how to plan your Office 365 deployment with really having security in mind. My name is Conrad Agramont. I'm Director of Technology Services here at Agile IT, and we've done almost 800 migrations successfully with 100% delivery on those projects. And really what we wanted to do is kind of share a little bit of that experience alongside our colleague today, Ion Gott from Microsoft. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the areas you have to keep in mind when doing the deployment, both of the infrastructure that's there, taking your data to that place in the cloud of Office 365 and ensuring that when it's there, both you're assured of security that Microsoft has there, as well as making sure that once your content is inside of the cloud on the internet, that the data is also secure at all the different places that it goes to. So Ion's going to give you basically an overview in a short period of time here of the various pieces that Office 365 has and Microsoft as a whole, both within the platform and within Azure as well. So we're going to go through a lot of information, but Ion's going to do a great job of not just talking about it, but also showing it with the demo here today. Ion?
Great, thank you, Conrad. Appreciate everyone taking the time out to join today's session. My name is Ion Gott with Microsoft. I'm a partner technology strategist, and I work closely with our partner ecosystem of partners like Agile IT, and work closely with customers on ensuring they adopt and deploy successfully on the Office 365 platform. So as Conrad mentioned, security is top of mind for everyone, and so in today's agenda for this webinar, I'm going to talk a bit about what Microsoft's doing in that space and how you can successfully make that transition securely to the cloud. So I'll talk a little bit about our Microsoft Trust Center, data encryption on the Office 365 platform, e-discovery and compliance, as well as some of the key security features in Office 365 and beyond that I'll actually be showing you today in a short demo to kind of whet your appetite around what Office 365 has to offer in terms of security, and then we'll wrap things up with a bit of Q&A and such. So wanted to just dive right in. So with Office 365, Microsoft takes security and trust and privacy very seriously. So in terms of kind of the three key pillars, and you can find a lot of this information in even greater detail up on the Microsoft Trust Center for Office 365. But we've built the platform around really these three key areas of security in terms of best-in-class security around our data centers, the platform, the security of the information, et cetera, in terms of how we think about multi-tenant data center operations and securing that data logically as well as physically, and the technology behind how we handle data encryption and security as well. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the next few slides. Compliance, that's a big one for all of us, right? Whether or not you're a public or private organization, being able to have not only an understanding in terms of Microsoft's global compliance standards, which meet and or exceed many organizations, whether it's in the financial, healthcare, public sector, commercial side of the business, we contractually commit to privacy and security standards around how we handle data within our data centers and how we process those agreements on behalf of our customers and such. So lots in the area of compliance, not only on the contractual legal side, but also on the admin side as well. And ultimately privacy is going to be an important one here too for every customer. We don't do any data mining or farming of that data for advertising like some of the competition does. We're very transparent too in terms of how we think of the location of our customer data, and you having a choice on where you're actually going to stand up your services. And if you want to keep that in the U.S., for example, that's something you have a choice to do. And then also same scenario in terms of how you think about disaster recovery and replicating that data within the Microsoft data centers as it relates to Office 365. And we keep enhancing the areas of privacy control and management for organizations, not only for the administrative side of the organization, but also for the business, to have the controls and settings they need to be able to manage Office 365 security. And so, in terms of Office 365 security, I'm just going to build this slide out in terms of kind of three key areas of built-in security and how we think about that in terms of the platform, and we take feedback and we take security seriously in terms of how we've architected the platform. And we have partners like Agile IT too that work hand in hand with us in terms of understanding customer security requirements. As you see in the outer ring, whether it's in this example HIPAA in the medical space, or it's FISMA or FedRAMP if you're actually a state and local government customer, and or some of the other independently verified or global compliance requirements or models such as model clauses from EU. So this ring though in terms of the center, in terms of how we think of the actual built-in logical security, physical security of the data center platforms, and then building around that the areas that are important to customers in terms of our security. And we're doing a lot in that space as Microsoft invests about $1 billion a year in security, and has made even some additional recent acquisitions, as you'll see in the news recently around Office 365 and some of our mobility platforms. But this really kind of gives you an idea in terms of that ringed or layered approach, and the outer area in terms of independent verification compliance. Microsoft works closely with our customers and organizations to ensure we meet those requirements and or exceed them in terms of that. And that's kind of the general concept behind not only that first pillar, but moving into that second pillar as we think about customer data isolation. What are some of the technical considerations and or logical considerations around how your information is protected in the cloud? So we support logical isolation, and the way to think of this is we encrypt at rest and secure that data across the physical hardware in our data center in a matter, for example, if you were to back a truck up and remove disk drives, or if that were to happen in the physical data center, the data is actually stripped and encrypted across multiple disk drives, isolated to that customer's tenant. And even though this is a shared software as a service model with the General Office 365 in the commercial space, we do everything we can in terms of logical isolation of that data to protect it. And then intended or unintended mingling of data is prevented too by the design of our Active Directory structure that has lived in the enterprise for over 15 years now, and building upon our expertise in directory services and securing that data to isolate it further as well. And I mentioned encryption, important to everyone, right? So we continue to build this strategy in terms of data encryption at rest. So when data is in our data centers, it stays there, it's encrypted. It's using strong layers of encryption and the advanced encryption standards, AES 256 in most cases, and then also some of the areas of a stronger SSL or TLS for data in transit. Between the client and server if you're connected from a mobile device or an endpoint. And then, complementing that with some of the other areas of protection that Microsoft offers if you're running, Windows and using BitLocker for disk encryption, or if you're looking at, things like per-file encryption, which is also part of Office 365 and our rights management suite. So there's a number of ways to provide end-to-end encryption. Most of this we handle behind the scenes for you, and then some of the more customer-facing or client-facing configuration, you have the flexibility to control and manage that, in terms of how you decide to deploy and what data you protect. So that's in your control. And getting a little bit further into that conversation around data security, it's actually a good transition point to talk a little bit about what Microsoft is doing in that space. And for us, in terms of our mobile-first, cloud-first strategy, and one of our bold ambitions around making users, productive and on the productivity platform, they got to be secure, right? So we've got to have the right info available to the right person on the right device, because users want anywhere, anytime access, and the lines are blurring more than ever around, the devices they bring in, for work and the data they're accessing. So even native within the Office 365 platform, we have the concept of rights management services to protect that information, to protect at the file level that information that you're exchanging with your organization, whether that's intellectual property or that's documentation that has PII in it or credit cards, whatever it might be. Having conditional access and being able to share information not only internally the organization but outside is an important requirement for most of our customers. And doing business in the cloud or in a hybrid model, we give you the flexibility to decide how you want to use that solution in terms of management and enablement of that story as it relates to strategies around data access. And here, in terms of how you think about this in an organization, a lot of organizations are going to have requirements to share internally. You have your traditional on-premise directory services built around Active Directory, and extending the identity into the cloud. I mean, this is kind of where it all starts. If you're a customer that's currently making the transition, or you've already gone to Office 365, you know that the identity is important across the different devices that you're accessing. So data encryption, in terms of files, rights management services to enable that, in terms of policy enforcement and enablement across whatever type of endpoint the user is accessing, and you're wanting to protect that data, right? And that's the data within Office 365 or in the customer's data center. So how do you get your data there, right? I mean, if you're thinking about making the transition to Office 365 and you've got a lot of data, what are your options to do that securely? So there's a number of ways that we can handle that integration from, not only the traditional hybrid cloud strategy or story that Microsoft has been touting for, a number of years now since Office 365 was launched, but new services too that are available that tie in with things like drive shipping to encrypt on encrypted drive sets your data, and ship that to an Office 365 data center if you're importing a lot of data for Exchange or SharePoint or OneDrive for Business, et cetera, or moving it over the network, depending on what your SLAs are in terms of time to migrate and what data you're thinking about moving in the far left. You've got options, and you can do that securely in terms of bringing data from outside Office 365 into the platform, and doing it the way you'd like to do that in terms of securing the data and the efficiency of the data moving in. Securing the identity in the device, right? We talked a little about that a moment ago on everything sort of starts with the identity, right, in your Active Directory environment. And we kind of highlighted the data side of moving data, how it's encrypted in our data centers. But let's talk more about the identity model as it relates to securing the identity, because those are the keys to your data, whether you're talking about your end user, it's in sales or somebody that's handling very sensitive data, or your administration team. Enabling single sign-on, same username, same ID, password. That's a very important area, in terms of managing passwords, restricting the attack surface, in terms of protecting that identity, and how we give customers the option to do SAML-based token-based authentication, which not only opens up opportunities for single sign-on in Office 365, but many of the other 2,500 plus applications, that are out there from third-party SaaS providers that your organization's using as well. And you've got options here. You see, you can synchronize password hash or user accounts. I won't go too far into that. I mean, if you want to hear more about the intricacies of how that can be set up, it's definitely something that myself and the Agile IT team can help provide some additional clarity on. But the idea here is that you've got a secure identity model built upon what you're accustomed to using in the Active Directory space, and we give you options in terms of how you synchronize directory objects, passwords into the cloud, right, for use with Office 365. And we do that using some of the advanced security standards for TLS and SSL, as well as how we hash and store that set of information. And then even bringing more security capabilities to the table in terms of built-in two-factor authentication and client-based access control for conditional access, restricting, say, maybe certain devices that are jailbroken, or preventing devices that don't meet, your compliance or policies, etc. And that's sort of where, you think about that identity process of, passwords. That can be a challenge. You see a number of organizations where that's where they get compromised, sharing passwords, password files cracked, etc. we bring multi-factor authentication to really any phone. And I'm actually going to show you a little bit of this during the demo, but we have a mobile app for push notifications, so use a one-time PIN or a stored PIN that you remember. We got phone calls for verification, and or if you get that call and you didn't expect it, you can report immediately that as fraudulent activity to alert your security team and help ensure that something worse doesn't happen if you're in the process of being compromised, etc. Or text one-time passwords. So a few different ways we can do that across multi-factor authentication built right into Office 365. On the device, we bring mobile device management, natively into the Intune platform. So if I'm an end user and I've signed in, I've used multi-factor, now I've got my device and I'm BYOD, I brought my own device to work. How do I get that, get my work email and things on there and work within these sort of different spaces or containers and have that be productive for me as an end user? We have something called Intune, part of Office 365, now that gives you capabilities there to manage those devices right out the gate, not have to use another solution. Got some built-in capabilities around selective wipe and a number of ways to manage applications and policies. And then we even have some other premium offerings that build on top of this, but right out of the box, you could secure not only the data platform with Office 365, the identity, the device. You might notice the trend here. We're covering in on sort of all those key areas that are important to you as an organization in terms of making the user productive, getting to the Office 365 platform, and enabling user to access line of business apps and do that securely, access Office Mobile, access data in OneDrive for Business, all done securely with Intune. Now, what about other areas of compliance, and e-discovery? As I think about that one, you've got all this data, but how do we keep things in order, keep things in check as it relates to protecting my content and ensuring that what I'm doing is not only secure, or if I've got a case or an investigation going on, got e-discovery and compliance. And why is it so important, right? And these are just some stats, but you hear about this all the time in terms of protecting the organization, being able to, search through that content and, being able to protect the organization in litigation or lawsuit type situations. And it's commonplace, right? I mean, it's nearly half experience some sort of, legal lawsuit, throughout the year. I mean, it's a big challenge, but built right in, you've got the ability to do case management, e-discovery, legal hold, and be able to help, protect the organization and reduce some of those legal costs or exposure as it relates to, some of the areas of litigation e-discovery. And we simplify that directly within Office 365 through our Compliance Center. So across like the SharePoint Online, the Exchange Online platform, OneDrive for Business, we give you the ability to place, as I mentioned, legal holds so that content doesn't get deleted that's pertinent to a case. We've got search and analytics built in to help you efficiently perform case management and be able to search across the different platforms. And most recently, Skype for Business added in there too, but you can sort of see the list of services. And we give you one place to do that. So you're not having to search and go use different tools or products, to do that. And this is, of course, takes into account if you've moved all your workloads, across SharePoint, Exchange Online, OneDrive for Business, etc., into the cloud. And there are some hybrid scenarios you can support, the Agile team could talk to you more about. But that's sort of the discovery side. And with that, I wanted to sort of move into, let's actually show you some of this stuff and sort of jump right into the demo. So I was going to go first to a multi-factor sort of authentication scenario with a device. So I actually have up here the web sign-in page for an application in Office 365, and I've hit the sign-in page, and my administrator has actually turned on multi-factor authentication, and I've got this turned on so you can see all the different options. But normally you might choose what makes the most sense for your users, and in your environment. So what I've got here is I'm going to go ahead and show you on an iPhone device that I'm going to bring up here on the screen now what actually happens when I trigger one of these events. So we're going to go ahead and do a call. So it's go ahead and it's going to call me here. And
Microsoft sign-in verification system. Please press the pound key to finish verification. If you did not initiate this verification, someone may be trying to access your account.
So that was actually the phone call. And what I did there is use the phone to do the actual sign-in. And what I'm having a little bit of a challenge with at the moment is actually mirroring my screen here for some reason. My phone is acting up a little bit. But what you can see happens right here is that, I now have verified, and I can go through a number of different verification steps here. So I've got two-step verification. So I've got a very secure environment. You can see my session here is limited to amount of time. And so that's multi-factor, and that can be controlled by the administrator to be, as I mentioned, a text, one-time password, in the text. It could be a phone call with PIN verification like we just did, where I verified it completely on my phone, or I could do that through email. So you see there's a few different options here in terms of how you can support that scenario. And so moving sort of right along here in terms of the Office 365 side of this, if I go into here, I'm in an Office 365 Admin Center tenant. And here I'm in as an administrator, and down here in my admin portion of the node here, I've got a number of different areas of the products I can manage, but I also have the Compliance Center. So when I actually click on the Compliance Center, that'll take me right into the Office 365 Compliance Center screen, and in here I can do a number of things related to management of data security. Things such as archiving, data loss prevention. There's a number of things I can work with, in terms of case management, and things of that nature. So when I'm in here, for example, I can go ahead, and go into our eDiscovery node here, and you'll be able to see, the eDiscovery case management screen. And so once I'm in here, I could go ahead and it'll pull up existing legal cases. In this case, I have one I created earlier, or I could go ahead and create another. But in this case, I'm going to just go in and open the case here. And what this does is it's leveraging SharePoint on the back end, and I can do some different things here, in terms of looking at the status and stats here, as I can find items, and type keywords in here that I want to search against and put a legal hold on that data. And so from the user perspective, this is transparent, but for me as an end user, I would be in here as the administrator, searching and working through that content. And why this is up, there's a number of things I could show you in terms of search and whatnot, but I'll just kind of take you through the screens here in terms of, because we have a little bit of limited time. But you could do queries, and if I do a new item based on particular query search, I can do that by text string, the item size, and get results returned here. I can look through different sources, for example, across, like I mentioned, OneDrive for Business, Skype, SharePoint, Exchange Online, and I can drill into all that different information that's available within the Compliance Center. And if I actually go back, here to the Compliance Center, and I can show you real briefly here, the creation of a case. It's pretty simple. I won't create another one, but I go ahead and name that case. I can identify a website address, for that case, and I can give it a template assignment, and then I can use permissions, etc., to assign rights to this, right here in the portal. And this gives you the capabilities right at your fingertips to be able to manage and work with these different sources in terms of eDiscovery within the organization. And search and export, I can export to PST or download that content for be able to share it with the legal team or whatever I might need to do there in terms of case management. And then we have a number of built-in reports to look at who's accessing what, around our data leakage prevention, around our audit reports, what types of searches or activities been performed in the environment. We also have our retention reports, our retention categories to define, how long certain content is preserved within the organization across Exchange, SharePoint, or OneDrive for Business. And then we have in here another way to import data. I sort of talked about, how you're importing data into the service. And so this screen here, it's all done. I'm in here as an administrator, but a normal user would have more of a limited view of just the Office 365 services that are exposed to them. And sort of speaking of that, sort of user scenario, here, I wanted to make sure that I could show you, what some of this looks like, from the iPhone perspective, right, as I sort of promised here. So if this is going to behave, which it is now, thankfully. So I've got my Microsoft apps here at the bottom of the screen, and here I can go into the Microsoft app group that I created, and you see I have a number of different things from my apps to RMS sharing to the multi-factor client. So when I get actually a notification, I get a pop-up through this app that lets me verify my PIN if I want to choose to do it that way. And then, also you'll see some of my other apps in here for Office 365, like OWA, the Office 365 Admin Center, as well as Skype. And then you saw some of my Office mobile apps, and at the bottom of my screen, some of the managed applications, I had deployed, through Office 365. And we're just about complete with the demo here. In terms of sort of showing you what all that looked like. And so this is actually where I signed in and got access, to some of those other apps that I made available through that multi-factor authentication scenario. And then, here I could go back, to signing back in, if I'd like to. But I'll go ahead and move back to the presentation here, and I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to Conrad with Agile IT. Agile IT is a managed partner, a gold managed partner that I work closely with here at Microsoft that does quite a bit around Office 365 migration solutions. So Conrad, stage is yours.
Thanks again, Ian. Really appreciate the demo and the slides. It looks great as always. At Agile IT, we put a really strong emphasis on getting things done right. We put a lot behind our 100% guarantee, making sure that there's no failed migrations. At the end of the day, we're going to make sure you're migrated no matter what. And really, some of the other key differentiators for us is really having kind of a fixed fee model for how we price things out and how we deliver on our solutions. So one of the things that we take into account is all the different aspects around security needed, and that's part of our discovery, part of our preparation, and part of our delivery for these migrations. Because at the end of the day, you want your mail that's up there, but you have to really be confident that your data is secure, both in transit and then also when it lands there. So protecting your data is really a high priority of ours. So if we go to the next slide, one of the things that we also created was something called Agile Protect, which is really a suite of different backup and restore services that we have, and one of them is specifically focused on Office 365. So if you look at all the things that Ian talked about in terms of protecting your information, what we wanted to do is also make sure that you had a backup service that backed up the content that's inside of Exchange Online, so your public folders, shared mailboxes, individual mail accounts, your files and folders that are inside of SharePoint or even OneDrive, and that we get that data. And a big part of what we focus on is always things in the cloud. So we don't send things to tapes. We don't put things on-prem. What we really focus on is getting that data that you have in the cloud, taking snapshots of those, and then storing them back into your own Microsoft Azure subscription. So really, all your data remains with you. Everything is still really cloud-related, and you have this ongoing backup of your service. So all of these different fronts in terms of securing your data, making sure that when your content is flowing throughout the internet, it's being protected with things like rights management or on the devices, or we have these other backup services. That's really kind of our focus. So when we bring customers in, we really have this holistic view of not just one project, but the overall life cycle and continuum of your data. So next slide. And so really the next step is let's have a discussion. So really there's two really easy ways to get in touch with us. You can give us a call, go to our website, contact us, and we're really focused on taking customers to the cloud. Right now this discussion was around Office 365. We also help customers transition their infrastructure to the cloud in many different ways, but that's the time for another webinar. So I want to thank everybody today for joining on, and really at this point we're going to open it up to questions.
Well, thank you, Conrad. And we do have some questions. I'm going to go ahead and throw these out to both you and Ian to reply to. The first one is, my company has a BYOD policy that allows them to use their own device. Can Are IT services still manage their device without the company physically owning my phone or service plan?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, with BYOD being commonplace now, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the reasons what we integrated into in terms of mobile device management directly into the Microsoft Office 365 platform. So management of those devices, onboarding of a device, to manage for the email settings or PIN password requirements or selective wipe if the user leaves the organization. You only want to remove the corporate data. You've got those choice fingertips built right in, to manage that device securely. So yeah, that's definitely something you can do within Office 365 with Intune.
All right, next question. What Office 365 plans are required for e-discovery, and do I need it for all of my users?
Yeah, that's also a great question. So the plans that you want to look for under Office 365 is going to be either the Suite plan with the Enterprise Plan 3 or Exchange Plan 2 specifically. Those are the two plans. And no, you do not need to license all users. You can mix and match your license types. But obviously with the E3 or the Exchange Plan 2, it's going to give you access to searching all mailboxes in the eDiscovery Center.
Okay, I think we only have time for one more. This one is, can Azure Rights Management protect my on-premise data as well as cloud data?
Yes, that's also another good question. So there's obviously, Office 365 is 100% in the cloud, managed in the cloud, and there is Azure Rights Management that helps secure those items. But that integration also works down on-prem as well. So there is a server component that you would actually download and install inside of your environment, and from there you can actually extend the rights management to other areas within inside of your infrastructure. So you can still leverage the cloud. So now instead of running your own rights management service, excuse me, that needs to be highly available, now you just leverage Microsoft's infrastructure for highly available rights management services on the internet, and you just tap into that using Azure Rights Management and still leveraging it both for your services in the cloud and on premises.
Very good. Well, that's all the time we have, but we will be referring any questions that you may have sent through that we weren't able to get to our presenters for their follow-up by email. So on behalf of msexchange.org, I want to thank our speakers, Steve, Ion, and Conrad, for just a wealth of great information today. And of course, thanks to Agile IT for sponsoring today's event. Be sure to watch your email for the next msexchange.org informational webinar. And this will conclude today's event. Thank you again for joining us. You may now disconnect.